Tell me a bit about you, Steve. How did you get to where you are, where you're working in games, you're working with feedback? You obviously had quite a journey.
Yeah, unlike most of your guests, I don't have a background going back decades in the games industry. The games industry found me, something a lot of people would wish would happen to them. So I've been running a software company for quite some time, and the product, our main product now, we launched it in 2017. It's a feedback management tool for software companies, and it's used by banks and government departments and lots of software products. But then strangely, the video games industry found us. We never pitched it as a tool for video games, but somehow the USP, the problem that it solves, plus the way we've gone about it, really struck a chord with the games industry. In 2020, we'll remember 2020, there was this little thing called COVID. One game that really did well during COVID that was released then was Valheim. Yes, Valheim.
Yeah,
It was a big phenomenon, and they found us and used us to gather feedback from their players to manage it all in one place and have a voting system and so on, so they could make players feel listened to and work out what features they should put in next or what should go in the next update. Now, it turns out that people who work in video games companies are also players of video games, and people will be playing Valheim. They would see this feedback management tool and they'd be thinking, that looks good. We could use that too. And before we knew it, we had like dozens of video games companies using us, mostly in Europe, very strongly in Sweden, but all over the place.
And what did it mean to collect that feedback? Like what things are you looking at? Just are you happy with the game or specific usability problems or bugs or all of the above?
Okay. Some players are very vocal, right? They'll tell you about everything they like, everything they don't like in a particular tone. And it tends to be bug reports, but also like playability problems or ideas. For example, they saw that this other game that they like playing has mounts so that you can fast travel from area to area, and your game doesn't have mounts or it doesn't have fast travel. So they're telling you, I want this thing in your game. Often these ideas are completely impractical for your game, but sometimes they're not. And you've got a development team that knows the next update, they need to add some major new features. They have all these ideas, and it's really hard to work out which ones are the ones that are going to resonate with the players. If you listen to feedback, have a good way of quantifying it, then you can make sure that you're actually going to build the things the players want. And more importantly, or just as importantly, you avoid building the things that no one's actually interested in. Maybe no one wants a new class. Maybe no one wants like a newer version of the fireball spell or, make the boss easier on level 1 or whatever. You think players want this, but if you're not listening in a way in which you can let people speak and quantify it, you're not finding this information out. And then what you tend to do is you start building the stuff that's the pet idea of somebody very prominent in your team. It might be lead developer, it might be the lead of the game, the artistic director. They think this is what players want, this is what players need, and they can be wrong sometimes.
On the flip side, though, can't also the players be wrong about what they want? Like, there are plenty of games that I use a classic example, World of Warcraft, where as it kind of moved away from vanilla and it went through the expansions, the gameplay was facilitated like earlier mounts, cheaper mounts. Like there were areas of friction that made the game, or at least the people who played at that time, that they enjoyed. But that those friction points were removed gradually to allow for more casual players to come in. And slowly the game lost a bit of its identity. But on paper, they were listening to their customers, or they were listening to people who wanted to play the game but were frustrated with pain points. So there's a bit of a clash between the vision of the game itself and what it's supposed to be, and then kind of growing it and getting more players, or just appeasing current players who may find it difficult. How do you balance that?
The vision of the game, sure, but also the financial realities. World of
Absolutely.
Warcraft was a juggernaut and had an enormous team, and that you've got a situation where if you're not paying attention to the financials of the game, you're going to have to lay people off, right?
Yeah.
I was a World of Warcraft player back in those days, in the early days where level 60 was the maximum. And I remember there was an update in which things were easier. I think what happened is if you went offline for more than a day, then when you started playing again, you were getting an XP at 50% faster than normal.
Yeah.
And it felt kind of wrong. It's like, this is not fair. I worked so hard to get XP. Why should people now be getting it easier? But, so this actually reveals something you're asking. You're playing it as an existing customer, existing player, but the development team, they're listening to lots and lots of people. You're just one. And sure, some players will want one thing, some players will want another, and those things can clash. And you're never going to make everybody happy. This is one of the dilemmas of doing early access game with updates happening, or what's the word they use now? A live ops game where there's always new things happening. It's really hard to work out what's right and which players you're going to make it for. Are you going to optimize for getting new players into the game? Are you going to optimize for making existing players enjoy it more? It's hard. It's really hard. There is no easy answer, by the way. And this is not just for games. This is across the board. Everybody has to work out what to build next into a software product, really struggles to make sure they get a right balance.
And there's kind of, again, going back to that, to me, it feels like it's the approach is binary. On one hand, you have kind of the Fords of the world saying, if people told me, if we listened to what people wanted, they would have wanted faster horses at the time, right? So there's that edge of it. Even the Steve Jobs who say, people don't know what they want. They will want what I show them. And then on the other, you have the more user research side, which is listening to the customer, understanding their pain points, and kind of really following what they say as a way to improve the product itself or the game. How do you, with your feedback product, how do you find that sweet spot? How do you differentiate between certain user types or player types or demographics or whatever it may be to understand how you should weight these feedback points to then understand how to action them?
You don't. There's a lot of art to this. Yes, you get some quantifiable data, but you also have to use your own feeling, your vision for the game, etc. There's another aspect too of that Henry Ford quote and Steve Jobs, is that people who use your game, they tend to ask for incremental improvements. They don't tend to see big picture ideas. They also tend to ask for something in a very specific way, but they're not thinking back like, what's a more creative way we can achieve the same thing? So you have to be really careful about listening to somebody who says, I want you to fix this thing and I want you to do it this way. It's your job as the game maker, the studio, or maybe even the publisher, but probably the studio, to really take that data you're getting from listening to players, but then also filtering it through A, your vision, B, what it costs to build things, C, the financial reality, and D, like balancing between existing players and new players and so on.
It's really about following kind of what is the goal for the game at that point in its life cycle, right? Like, what are you trying to achieve?
I have a story for you. This is just triggered. Do you know
please.
about Boaty McBoatface?
I do. I think it was they named it after, was it a space station, or it was something that they allowed the community to vote for the name, right?
Right. It was a UK government-funded Antarctic research vessel. My memory is that it cost like at least £100 million to create, which in euros and dollars is also at least 100 million. And they decided to engage the public into this thing to try and raise awareness of the public of what they're doing. So we'll let the public vote. And they ran a poll on the internet, the public being what they are. I think a couple of radio stations got into it and decided, hey, let's call it Boaty McBoatface. Let's all vote up that name. A ridiculous name. It's a name you don't want to give to a £100 million Antarctic exploration vessel, state of the art and everything. This is the problem if you let people make your decisions for you, the public. A, they won't make the right decision. And B, like, people will play games with you. Like, it's always fun to find a way to manipulate anything public. So you always need to have this disclaimer that we are listening. Your input is part of our decision-making process, but we make the final decision. Was that boat ultimately called Boaty McBoatface? No, it wasn't. They ended up coming up with a compromise. I think it's called the Sir David Attenborough, or is it the Sir Richard Attenborough? I get the two confused. Named after like the famous BBC documentary maker.
David Attenborough, yeah.
But there are subs on board, like these self-controlled, remote-controlled robotic subs that could go and do exploration and stay under the sea for I think they stay under the sea for weeks or months at a time doing exploration under ice shelves. And one of them got called Boaty McBoatface. So this was the compromise. And this is, I think, also a smart way you can do things. If player feedback is not going in the direction you want, you can still do something with it, right? With a bit of creativity. But really, the main lesson of that story is you can't be making decisions based simply on popularity.
Absolutely. And you get that compromise again. You need to compromise though, because if you don't, if you allow people to give the semblance of any decision-making power, but then you don't follow through, then you just create this toxic loop where the next time you do it, it'll become like the boy cried wolf. It's like, well, now I don't believe you for voting this. And it might even end up with them being even more nihilistic about the whole outcome and being even more ridiculous about it for the next thing. So it's a vicious cycle potentially if you don't do it well.
So my company's products offer feedback boards, and they're hosted on our servers. And I noticed that the smarter or the more wise community managers setting up these boards put up a disclaimer at the top in the little free text area we have that says, we appreciate your input. However, the final decision remains with the developers.
How clear is that in the feedback board? Like, does it say like at the top? Like, is it when you're making a decision or a vote? Like,
let's have a look right now. Our first priority is to fix any major issues. No promises, all bold. Developing games. This is from Enshrouded, a survival game that uses us. Developing games is a complex and time-consuming task. Even seemingly small changes can completely upend your development plans. The team saying we love your idea does not mean it will happen or that it will happen soon. And that's at the top of the feedback board that everybody sees when they arrive here.
Okay. So tell me more about this feedback board. Like, is it like a Reddit style feedback board? Like, what kind of interactions are you trying to facilitate when collecting this type of feedback?
Okay, this is a chance for me to be more salesy, right?
Yeah, sure. Please.
So we've tried to capture what's good about Reddit, Steam forums, Discord for a studio, while fixing up the bad problems. So the problem with Reddit is you don't own it. Like Reddit, it's all on Reddit's infrastructure, Reddit's rules and whatever. You might have a moderator, but ultimately you have little control over what's happening. Whereas with our system, you're completely in charge. So, I mean, you can even delete things that don't match, if there's a problem. But a big problem with Reddit, and Discord has the same problem, searchability is terrible. If there's a conversation going on today about some thing you should add, like general combat feedback thread is what I'm seeing in front of me. People have a nice discussion. A week later, that will be forgotten, and someone else will come and create a new thread, a new post, and say, hey, I want to talk about combat. And the same conversation takes place again, except the people who remember it last time get frustrated. It's not easy for people new to your subreddit or your Discord to see what happened in the past. And you end up having the same conversations over and over again. And it's really frustrating, and it's time consuming, and it's hard to get any data out of that. So our system actually automatically is searching for matches as you type in a new post, a new thread, to say, hey, this sounds like this thing that's already been talked about. So you can just add your comment to that. Now, despite that, people will still sometimes make new threads, and we've made it really easy with a couple of clicks just to merge two discussions into one, bring across the comments, the votes, and everything. So you're not looking like from a clean slate all the time. The default view is you're seeing the most popular conversations that have ever happened. So Reddit has a decaying thing where very quickly things drop from the front page, right?
Yeah.
Whereas we keep them at the front page because the popular things, the ones people want to keep talking about for feedback for your game.
And to play devil's advocate, the power of Reddit is that you have these self-perpetuating communities of players that come together, not just because they want to talk about the game and how it can be better, but they want to share memes, they want to talk about new content or ask questions to other people or whatever it may be. And it's a living, breathing community. And a big plus side of that is that you have potentially millions of people using these Reddit threads. And how do you kind of leverage or take from that and apply it to your feedback board where maybe there are less people kind of on that feed, but how do you bring them over?
Okay. First of all, what you describe about Reddit is exactly what Reddit is good at, sharing memes and telling stories and so on. What it's not good at is a platform for managing feedback. So, and yet people will give you feedback there. So what we suggest is that you just add a link somewhere prominent that says got feedback. It goes over on the feedback board with a link to it. In some cases, you can have a Reddit bot that automatically detects things that looks like requests for new features or suggestions and tells people, hey, you should push it over there. There was a second part to that. Oh, you talked about millions of people on Reddit. See, this is one of the myths. Yes, there are millions of people on Reddit. There are not millions of your players on Reddit. Even if your game has 1 million players, only a small subset of them are on Reddit. Maybe some go and look at the subreddit briefly, maybe when they've got a specific problem or they're new to the game. Most people, they're too busy doing other things to want to be on Reddit all day or every day. They'll only go into the subreddit when there's a specific problem they have. So, or they're looking for tips to get past a boss or boss fight or something. So, yeah, this is really a very different thing than what Reddit is. Reddit is good at some things. We're good at something else.
But Reddit has a lot of, I think what I'm getting at is that Reddit has a lot of power users. Whenever you're looking at a Discord or a Reddit, like the people who are there most vocal are oftentimes not the bulk of your player base. They're a very highly dedicated super fan portion of the player segment. And that can be great, but that can also be misled in terms of the feedback you extract from them.
Exactly. If you think about Reddit too, it's the data I've read is that it's predominantly American. Yes, it gets used outside of America, but it's overwhelmingly American, very strongly male, and has a particular, what's the word, like ethos? No, etiquette, so on. Yeah, etiquette that perhaps scares off some people. And power users, bless them, they can be very good to listen to, but they can also sometimes be a little bit damaging when it comes to new players or people who are not well versed in the etiquette of something like Reddit.
Yeah.
So, hey, power users are great. You get a lot of feedback from them. They're the ones you know will be there testing out your new beta release or your new update. But you also have to make sure that you're not listening too much just to power users. Otherwise, it brings us back to the problem with our World of Warcraft, right? Where, I don't know. Actually, World of Warcraft went the other way, didn't they? They tended to make things much easier for new players.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what makes World of Warcraft such an interesting case study, because they had what was a really well received game that was growing so rapidly, and slowly but surely, by making mounts cheaper, by making XP faster, by allowing players to jump from 0 to 70 so they can get to the latest expansion, which all makes sense on paper. I think part of that soul of the MMORPG and the progression, and kind of especially like what was great about the game in vanilla when you played was the 0 to 60 journey, not necessarily just the end game and the rating. But how would you then?
Hey, can we just go back more on World of Warcraft?
Please. Sorry.
There was also a particular point in time. When was it, like 2006, 7, somewhere around there was its heyday. And they couldn't keep doing what they were doing infinitely because there were competitors coming on board, learning what they did, and also giving people different styles of MMORPGs. So this is something you also have to realize is you're not in a vacuum. It's not like players will play your game or they won't. It's like they'll play your game or that game or that game or that game. So I think we have to be fair to Blizzard with World of Warcraft, is that they were also operating in a competitive environment where other games were becoming very good very quickly.
For sure. And up until 2012, they were growing, they get to 10 million subs, or I think even more beyond that with Wrath of the Lich King. And then with Cataclysm, which was their third expansion, it started dropping a bit, and then they stopped reporting the numbers. But I completely agree with you, though, that it's not easy to develop that type of game, and you do have to make decisions that the Blizzard is financially kind of liable to growing the game and maintaining the salaries, and they probably hired more people to keep up with the growth, and you have to keep going in that trajectory, right? Like number has to go up in a lot of ways, and so I sympathize with that heavily.
I think also their player base matured, so I think they were really popular with university students in their heyday, and university students graduate and get full-time jobs and don't have time to play anymore. So this is also the problem with building for the existing players. At some point, they're not players anymore, and then you haven't worked on the new players.
That's so true. I've seen that working in live service games, even in MMORPG. the player base evolves, and you have this phenomenon now called gamer dads. So all these players, like even my age now, who are getting closer to maybe having a family,
Yeah.
you don't have 8 hours a day to just sink into an MMO.
No.
And so then the game has to adapt towards that new kind of type of player, but does it lose its identity along the way? That's the question. How do you remain loyal to a changing player base, but also the kind of the original vision and inception of the game? That's the challenge.
I think we've gone off topic a little bit of feedback, but I'm enjoying talking about this.
Yeah.
It's something I have no experience of. I've never run a game studio, right? I've never had to deal with these pressures, but I find it really interesting to hear about them and talk about them.
No, and again, working on feedback, like I think you're in that position where you're helping companies make sense of this, because you're either following kind of the gut sense of the internal development team, or you're also, well, you're not, it's not binary, you're not doing one or the other, but you're also leveraging what the community is saying and balancing that and taking decisions. Let's go back to feedback then for a sec.
Okay, sure.
How do you understand what type of player is what when they're voting on your feedback boards? How do you know that this is a power user, that this player is a new player, or they've just started doing this type of content? Because I imagine there's some weighting to who these people are. Like if you only go to Discord, they're only going to be power users there. I've made the mistake myself in my career where I listened to power users far too much, which then resulted in a lot of decisions that didn't necessarily reflect the wider player base that is maybe the more silent majority. So how do you distinguish that? And it doesn't even have to be for games. I mean, it's across any kind of product in tech or beyond. There are these disparities between player bases.
Yeah, there's certain types of people, and I think I'm one of them. If they see a text box on the internet, they feel like they need to write something into it. Look, I don't have an easy answer for what you're saying. How do you distinguish between power user feedback, casual user feedback, different demographics? I think I would come at it from a different way. No matter who the person is, if they have feedback, make it really easy for them to give it to you. Don't make them have to go through a whole set of steps. Let's take Discord, for example. So you're in the games industry, I'm in the games industry. We both have Discord running all day. Most people in the games industry do. It's how even some studios run all their internal discussions. Your players, most of your players are not on Discord. A small percentage of your players install Discord and create an account. An even smaller percentage actually use Discord more than once or twice. A smaller subset of that join your server. A smaller subset of that actually take the time to understand your server's structure and etiquette. And a smaller subsection of that actually are bold enough to write stuff in your feedback channel. Some people, it's the internet phenomenon that most people lurk. I think 95%. Did you tell me this in our intro call about how a high percentage of lurkers, or did I hear that in another conversation?
I can't recall it specifically, but I totally agree with that. There are a lot of lurkers that just don't really react or comment. What is it? We didn't talk about it in the intro call, but it's the 80-10-8 rule, where 80% are a silent majority that don't comment, don't do anything. Another 10% are the ones that are going to react and upvote. And then you have the 8% that will, or the 2%. There's a ratio that breaks down where a small minority are the ones that are vocal and talk and kind of react, and maybe a 2% are very intensely kind of they'll create a ruckus. They'll try to get an emotional reaction out of things.
Exactly. Or they just enjoy it as a way of passing time. My girlfriend passes her time watching YouTube videos and on Instagram. Me, I prefer to be on old school types of discussion areas, although increasingly YouTube. So going back to Discord, you've got this problem where if Discord is your main way of getting player feedback, it's going to be very skewed towards a particular type of person, player, personality. And don't mean power users alone. I mean even those people who enjoy being in that type of environment or going to the trouble of using Discord. So I believe very strongly that you have to make it so easy for anyone to give you feedback. You can argue, but if you let the casual player or the first time player give you feedback, they're not committed. If you make it hard, people are committed. This is a false argument. Or there's so many demands on our time on the internet. We're always a click away from some other site, some other game, some video, whatever, that if you make things, put in any friction in a process, you just lose a lot of people. So I think to make sure your feedback is balanced across a wide cross-section of all the people playing your game, you need to make it really easy, and you need to make it discoverable how to give you feedback. So most players don't have any feedback for you. They just take the game as it is. They play it, they don't play it. They like it, they don't like it. That's it. They don't want to tell you anything. But sometimes something has gone wrong or something particularly difficult is happening to them. I'll come back to like the first level boss. That's always the example I use. So maybe the third time they played your game, they finally got to the first level boss. And now they've actually become kind of emotionally involved in your game, emotionally committed. But now they have this time of finally, they're really struggling and they want to tell you. So you need to make sure there's a way that's very obvious to them to now tell you, hey, I find this is my third time playing the game and I find the first level boss too hard. It might be that lots of people think that, but if you haven't made an easy way for these typical, normal gamer to give you that feedback, you're not going to hear it.
But how do you then, the challenge, because I've encountered this in my career, how do you surface that feedback opportunity in a, depending on the type of game, either diegetic where it fits within the game itself and somehow it doesn't alienate you from the experience, it doesn't take you out, or you do it outside in more kind of formal channels like email or maybe the launcher of the game itself or whatever channel. How do you surface that in a way that doesn't detract from the game experience? Because if you're in a, let's say Valheim, let's stick to that example. You're killing a boss like after kind of a couple hours of gameplay, you're getting the game, you're at a point where the developers know this is a frustration point where 20% of players might get through on the first time and another 80% have to try again. Do you just show a pop-up, or do you check them off and send an email, or how do you surface that? Because that is interesting to me as a game developer.
Don't show a pop-up. Please never show a pop-up. They're just enraged players who are being brought out of their emotional experience of your game. But it's a really good question, and the answer depends a lot on what your game is and where it is. If you're an indie studio and your game's in beta testing, play testing or something, yes, it is okay to have that pop-up. People know, as long as you've told people in advance you are a play tester, or don't use a pop-up, but you do want something more intrusive. It might be at the end of a level or when they're quitting the game or so on. A good place to put it in a game is in the pause menu, right? Or the start menu. Every time they start the game, they see this like, send feedback. We want your feedback, or help us make this game better button up there with like new game settings.
Yeah, like hit it there. Like it could be a little like a little exclamation point that says, hey, like you give feedback if you want, but like just hide it in a way that isn't noticeable during the gameplay.
And look, if you've got 1 million players every day, you probably don't want that because you're probably drowning in feedback as it is. But yeah, so I'd say the new game menu, the pause game menu, if your game's at that stage in the like the process, especially if you're not getting feedback, you need to keep prompting people to tell them, we want feedback. We do want feedback. Like sometimes people don't even know you want feedback. So if they're struggling with that first level boss and they just think this is too hard, they might not even realize that you want to hear this. But so you need to be telling people over and over and over again. Sorry for cutting you off. I just want to also add that you mentioned about emails and release notes. You also have to have it there. If you're in this stage of your game in which you are craving feedback and not getting it, you need to tell people everywhere you possibly can. So on your Steam page, on your website, in the release update notes, everywhere. You just have to keep telling people over and over again, please give us feedback, with the hope that that person who has something to say will have seen that message at the right time and it will remind them that, yes, they do want my feedback and I'm going to tell them.
Now, if I'm Steam and you guys are adding your link for the player feedback, you're giving your link to go to the player board so people can give their feedback in a kind of more privatized channel. Wouldn't I, as Steam, want people to be commenting on the Steam game? Because if I'm a Steam user and I'm looking to buy your game, I want the review there and there. Like, I don't want to be taken to a private channel that I don't know how visible it is, or if it's just if I just kind of get redirected. But that's my question. Like, depending on the type of game you are and where you are in that development cycle, or even how prominent you are as a game studio and how well known you are, you're going to get feedback whether you like it or not. Like, you're going to get feedback on Steam. You're going to have players
Yeah.
going on Reddit and complaining about the game. You're going to have, I don't know, Eurogamer, God forbid they give a horrible review on Arc Raiders, but everyone's going to want to say their piece regardless. So how do you balance that between trying to get feedback that's actionable, like the way you're saying, and then just the natural cadence of feedback that just happens because the internet and people just want to share their thoughts?
Look, you should accept feedback in whatever form it comes in and wherever it comes in. If
Okay.
people want to say stuff on Discord or on Steam, Reddit, your own old school forum, whatever, email, customer support, accept all of these. You should have, I think, one like authoritative, this is the main place we collect it stuff you can guide people to. But especially if you're craving feedback, if you're in that stage of your game in which you're not getting enough feedback and you want it, you take it as it comes and where it comes. If people are writing stuff on Steam, accept that too. It's your job, probably as the community manager's job or the head of the studio, you've defined somebody's job, is to go and collate all that on a regular basis. But by no means should you tell people, don't give us feedback on Discord, Steam, etc.
Yeah.
This is really, you're competing against so many distractions and so on. You just have to accept it as it comes. Where Steam has a weakness, though, is the same thing with Reddit and with Discord. What was discussed today is forgotten in a week's time. Yeah. So you will also get the same conversations there over and over again. You just have to like live with that to some degree, I think.
100%.
Yeah. If Steam actually introduced a really good feature voting system, it would be bad for us. So I kind of hope they don't. But, that's not what Steam has created with their game discussion community areas. It's just a very broad thing.
Yes, it's just a message board basically where you can just add your thoughts, at least for Steam. And I guess speaking about Steam and like how those message boards can be, like it can be very scary for an indie studio to release a game, and any kind of negative press can result in review bombs or kind of players forming. I remember in university I studied the crowd mentality or crowd mechanics, where as soon as like there's this mob mentality when people start pile driving on a game and making comments, rather than each person being an individual with individual responsibility, you get this like collective. And then anyone says anything and it just goes out of control to the point where you may have made a minor slip up from a PR standpoint about an aspect of the game, but now it's blown up into this whole thing that you can no longer control. And because it's visibly on the page where people buy the game, which is Steam, it can be the make or break for any game coming out. So I think that's also one thing that I like about what you're doing is you're offering a space where
the studio is in control
in a way, but in a way where it's still fair and transparent. Because whenever you say the studio's in control, there's that fear that they're controlling the narrative fully. You still want players to be honest about what they want. You still want other players to read into what players are looking for or have found in that game, positive or negative. I'm always for transparency, but the studio should still be capable of at least being able to collect legitimate feedback that is helpful and productive and not baiting and kind of emotional.
That whole mob mentality is one of the curses of the modern age. And good community managers develop techniques for dealing with that, but it's hard. Something we tell our customers is that you can keep the flavor of some feedback, and yet with a couple of tweaks to editing it, you can really change the tone. So it might be latest update is worst game ever. I hope the devs, go and quit. And they'll actually say worse things than that, but I'm not going to say it here. So our system, nothing shows until the moderators have had a chance to say, yeah, this is okay. No, this is not okay. And they can also very quickly just edit it. So I would rewrite that, like worst update ever. I would change that to latest update needs some improvement. Okay, you've kept the same thought there, but you've really changed it from this really confrontational tone to something much softer.
Yeah, you're removing that extremity, right?
And you're still listening to players. And the thing is, people don't even remember what they wrote. They don't remember the exact words they use. So with a little bit of cleanup, you can keep that tone much softer. And this is the problem with something like Steam, in that you're not in control. It's Steam's rules. Steam are the ones who have the data behind the scenes, whereas we give you an area in which you are in control. You can export data. You can hide things. You can tidy things up. You can make things more pleasant to read.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is a slippery slope towards that, because in the right situation, you may want to avoid a certain type of feedback. When I think a lot of game studios need the harsh reality of what players are thinking and kind of certain statements, and put in the wrong hands of someone that is maybe self-serving, or someone that's trying to protect his team or his vision, and he's on the line, he may choose to hide that level of feedback, even though
Yeah.
potentially someone else might come through and kind of approach it in a productive way and be like, actually, let's deal with this feedback. It sounds very intense. It sounds very extreme, but maybe the players are onto something. Maybe they're saying something that in its extremity should be taken into account, but the studio or someone is choosing to silence that voice. Again, there's no right answer. I'm just trying to take the player's side of it. And
it's interesting when I think about all the feedback that comes into our customers every day. I don't see any alarming situations get out of control, which is really interesting. I'm going to have to look more into why that is. Is it just because we're tiny compared to Steam's communities? Or is it some of the decisions we've made? And we have made some design and user experience decisions made to minimize conflict. For example, we don't allow people to have nested comments. You can add a comment to a thread, you can add another comment, but we don't let them
comment of a comment of a comment,
because
right?
that very quickly descends into anger. Not always, but it can. Another thing we do is we don't bring the most popular comments to the top. Yes, there is a way you can do that, but by default, we just show them in chronological order, or reverse chronological order, I think, actually. Again, it's designed to minimize this, and we're not sending people notifications via email or whatever to say, hey, somebody added a comment to your post, because that's, again, the thing that brings someone back and gets them angry. So Reddit wants this, because Reddit wants engagement. That's the whole model, is to get people into Reddit as many hours per day. Our model is to try and get helpful feedback for your game.
I get all of that, but where I need to push back respectfully is that I think what makes Reddit a very powerful platform for collecting research, and I've used it a lot in the past, is that those comments get upvoted by other people who agree with that comment, and it rises to the top. Because for me, that helps understand, okay, what are the talking points or the perspectives or opinions that resonate the most with the people in that thread? And you can have comments that have thousands of upvotes that are like, okay, not only is this one person saying it, but 1,000 people agree with what he's saying. Thus, it has more prominence. So that's where I'd respectfully push back. I've always found that very helpful for me to kind of balance an opinion or an argument.
Okay, I should explain further that we do actually have a like button next to comments. That's the only way you can give feedback to an existing comment. If you add a comment, it's not referring to them, but you can like. And yes, we do have a button that will let it be ordered by popularity of comments. And we also only show the count of likes up to 100. If it's more than 100, we just show 100 plus. And this is, so it all lets people see this is a popular comment, but without getting into this, can I make my comment more popular than that comment by trying to get, the count above. Some of these gaming systems we try to do. And, we listen to our own customers, and the people had asked us, make it possible to like comments. And we came up with our implementation, and nobody's ever given us any negative feedback on it, which is really nice.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me, in the sense that you can see 100 plus comments. You need to see at what level it is. Maybe the studios collecting the feedback can see the specific number, but from a player perspective, when you're looking at kind of comments that have been upvoted, you don't need to see that it's 5,000 or 500. Even just 100 plus could be okay, as long as you can see that there's some level of traction, and maybe there's still a ranking in how they're being displayed. Let me move then to another thing that we discussed when we first had our intro call, which was the idea of incentivization, right? So if you want people, how do you get people to give their feedback? And I remember we had a chat about this, but are we offering them in-game rewards? Are we giving them the idea that developers are listening to them and maybe they have a chance to speak to them? Because for a lot of these players, what I've noticed on Reddit is that nowadays everyone is an expert in game development. And I don't mean this like in
Yeah. I watched a
in a
YouTube
mocking
video, therefore I'm an expert.
yeah, but I don't mean this in a mocking sense. Like genuinely,
Okay.
like the players who have played certain games for a very long time are to certain degrees like very much experts in that game. They've seen the history of the game. They've played it so much that they
Okay.
understand the dynamics.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times for them being able to react or discuss something with a moderator or with a developer within the game studio is such a big thing for them, and it's a big thing for the studio as well, because it's like, wow, I'm so into this game. I now get to speak with the very people that are influencing it to be created. It's like
Yeah.
a citizen and a politician. It's like, oh, I get to meet this politician and get to tell him how their policies are working for me and what I'd love to see. And in a lot of ways, that's the most enlightening part of being like a super fan or a fan of a game. So how do you, going back to this long ramble, but how do you build incentivization to make sure that people want to give feedback and that they're kind of good people to give that feedback for? Or do you avoid it altogether and just try to keep it as neutral as possible?
I think incentivization, so you mean like an Amazon gift card or
Yeah, can be
Nitro,
anything.
Nitro for a month or something. This is the one we give away if we want someone to feel rewarded. This has its place. This is more like customer research, player research, where you want to engage in like a survey. Like nobody wants to fill out your 20-question survey unless you're offering them Nitro or Amazon or something, Amazon voucher. So it has its place there. I think for somebody just to tell you their feedback based on their emotional reaction to your game, that's enough. Like the emotional reaction is often enough, and combined with the feeling that they get to be listened to. So if they get the sense that your team is listening to the feedback, and they see that because you're making like an official comment on a feedback thread or something, I would say that's enough. I don't see why you would want to incentivize somebody just saying, the boss on level 1 is too hard. But I do think you'd want to do that if you wanted them to give you some really long feedback.
That's what it is, right? Depends on how much you're expecting of them to give.
And this touches on the problem that the word feedback can mean so many things.
Yeah.
Even when we're talking about getting feedback from specific things in a game, it depends on whether you're talking about a game that's already got a healthy feedback loop going, or a game that's struggling to get any traction, or a game that did have players but when on launch, but it got a lot of bad Steam reviews, and how do they deal with that? In all these different cases, the feedback you want is kind of a different thing. Like if you're one of these really big successful companies, the biggest problem you've had feedback is you're drowning in it. And I know this because I talk to people at the really big studios. A couple I've talked to lately, the billion-dollar companies, and the problem they're facing is they're just drowning in feedback coming from all these different channels. Yes, they accept feedback on Discord and Steam, and etc. And they can't make any sense out of it. Every day it's just there, so much more to go through. But then if you're like a really small indie studio, your problem is how do you get feedback? Maybe you are a small indie studio that is getting feedback, but now how do you process it? What do you do with it? How do you decide which is important and which isn't? I know we talked about that a little bit already, but I see these as 3 very different problems where you're talking about when we talk about feedback.
Well, forgive me, but I'm going to have to say the buzzword that has been for the last 3-4 years, but enter LLMs and AI. If you have so much overwhelming feedback, I think the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people is, well, let's use this amazing technology that crawls through language and observes sentiment. And I've already seen a lot of these tools in the works, although I think how well they work is a hit and miss in my opinion. But wouldn't that be the logical path if there's just so much feedback and you don't want to miss any of it and you want to continuously analyze as the game evolves what players are saying every day?
Yeah, this is a really good question. In danger of speaking poorly of products in that space, I do have sales calls every couple of weeks. I get to talk to somebody in the industry, and they've tried tools like this, and they say like, yeah, the results were mixed. Like we really still can't tell what we should do with this feedback, or it misses important stuff, or it doesn't understand tone. To use a very one example of where I think this stuff we're going to call it sentiment analysis, right? So using AI tools or LLMs to do sentiment analysis to feel what players are saying. So if your players are all German men in their 20s, there's a particular cultural way of expressing themselves and giving feedback. I lived in Germany for 7-8 years, and I was very struck by how straightforward and direct Germans are. They'll just say, I don't think this is a good idea. And me coming from New Zealand, I'm a little bit struck. Oh, how can I say it to me in the workplace? They're not softening it. But to a German, this is not rude at all. Whereas you take somebody from the UK, they're more likely to use euphemisms like, oh, yeah, that feedback is interesting, they'll say. And what they actually mean is, I think this is a terrible idea. Whereas a German would not use it like that. I mean, there's jokes around about cross-cultural communication and how what one person thinks they're saying is very different to what the other person's hearing. This is a big problem of sentiment analysis. It can't tell how to distinguish between cultural ways of expressing feedback. Then there's the classic Slavic approach where by default, a Slav person will have a very negative attitude to almost anything unless it's really, really good, and then they'll say it's okay. Right. So I think this is a problem with these tools. Maybe they'll get better. I hope they do. And something also along that way of thinking is language. So not just the way of expressing yourself in English, but language. So if you've got, this is a real situation I heard of from a Swedish company. They got big in China, but they were getting terrible reviews in China on Steam compared to what they were getting in Western Europe. And they eventually worked out the problem was that most of the Chinese players didn't speak English or weren't comfortable giving feedback in English. So they give their feedback in Chinese, and they felt they weren't getting listened to because there was no interaction with their feedback. So how's an LLM helping with giving feedback to the feedback, helping people feel listened to? Their solution ultimately from this Swedish studio was to hire somebody who spoke Chinese, a community manager, who was then at least able to tell people, thank you for their feedback. Yes, this is like something else we've heard. Yes, we know about this. Okay, I'll make sure like the studio boss hears about this. And almost immediately their Steam reviews started going up, their average Steam review in China. And it was not by doing anything, except by just basically making people feel they were listened to. And then taking that feedback and using it. And again, how does an LLM help with making people feel listened to? So it's a very long way of saying, yes, these tools do have a place, and I think they are helpful when you're drowning in feedback to get an initial starting point, but that's not enough, not as they exist today.
I think it's not enough I think what you're describing is an agentic solution where you have an LLM kind of occupying most of the work. When I've seen, at least in my experience as well, I've used kind of ChatGPT to go through Reddit feedback. I used to post on Reddit. I get thousands of comments, and I'd just be like, "How on earth am I?" And I used to try to read them. I would read them one at a time, or I'd skim through them, and I'd kind of get a sense of what they're trying to say. But at the end of the day, if I have to create an internal document for us to analyze a project or how a feature is being kind of seen by the community in this time right now, LLMs were very helpful for me to kind of get a summary of work. So the way I'm describing is more like a tool that people use with that Chinese community manager. Not only is he kind of engaging with the community directly in kind of the native tongue with kind of the cultural understanding of the language, but using an LLM on top of that to just amplify his capabilities of synthesizing the information, which he will also edit the output based on what he's read himself. So I'm a firm believer of leveraging LLMs and these ChatGPTs as something that does 80% of the work, but then you edit that 20% of the value to then I think that's the future in a lot of ways for most of these tools. It's not just, hey, it's going to do it all by itself and it's going to spit something out every day and you're just going to use it and you don't have to have community managers. I really think that community managers are always going to be needed because
there's the human touch.
A
product I use every day. In fact, this tool we're using right now to record this podcast, I don't use it every day, but I use it regularly. I had some feedback, and they were a question for them, and their like support page says, "We've got humans that are available to talk to you 24 hours." And I thought, "Oh, great! I'm going to get straight to somebody who can help." But no, first I had to go through a chat bot that was absolutely useless. I felt devalued, and it's actually made me feel negative about the tool. Even though I love Riverside, this platform we're recording on, it was the first time I ever had a negative experience because I thought they're wasting my time making me go through this process until I can finally talk to the human who's the one who's going to actually be able to help me here.
Yeah.
So this is it's a balance. It's a balance.
It's a balance, but you bring up a good point about chatbots. Couldn't it be that if we keep let's play devil's advocate on this agentic solution? Couldn't the future be every player has a chatbot that kind of understands the chatbot has access to all the data that the player has gone through up until that point. So they've played the game for X amount of hours, they've done this amount of content, or they've gone through these amounts of hoops like level 3, they've done these quests, or they've done this action or defeated this boss. And then based on that understanding of also the device they're using, the time of download, how they paid for it, all this data, it can then have a conversation with that player, knowing who that person is, and then maybe it could spit out an output that is helpful to a studio. And it could only work if you have thousands of these bots all working across players. I'm fantasizing, but
yeah. So first, if such a thing exists, I'm sure it'll be very helpful. Second, try to get that through your privacy team, your legal team. Like the big studios I deal with, like everything has to go through legal, security, and privacy. And like they have hard questions. And finally, it still creates the problem of quantification. Like how many people are having this problem? How many people have this idea? How many people want to see this improvement? This still needs to happen somehow. And sometimes the easy way of doing that is just give people voting buttons.
Just voting buttons, a simple click.
Yeah,
click
very
off,
simple. Like click and they're done. And like we didn't have to create some very almost science fiction solution to try and help.
Okay, I have another question then. Tangentially, what kind of similarities have you seen like across like other industries compared to gaming when it comes to feedback? Like, just curious. Like, you've worked with banks, you've worked with other institutions. How do they compare or are similar in that regard?
Nobody is emotionally involved to their bank, right? They just want to manage their money well. Games, players are so enthusiastic. They're so passionate. For better or for worse, sometimes this shows in people wanting to be really helpful. No bank has somebody going to look for 10 ways in which they can improve your product. But a player might come with 10 different suggestions of things they want to see added to your game, and they're coming from a good place. That's the positive side. The negative side is nobody's saying to somebody in the bank, I hope you go and do X to yourself. I'm not even going to say the words we hear.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Whereas some players, especially I think the younger players who are probably not so, by which I mean people in their mid-teens, probably they're not used to expressing themselves in a socially acceptable way massively. They have this way of talking to their friends and they don't realize you can't be saying this in a bigger scale. This is a real problem you hit. I also have my podcast in which I talk to community managers, and I've heard some dreadful stories of police having to be involved to go and knock on someone's door and say, hey, I think your son has been saying these things online. Is he home? We need to have a talk to him. And then,
it can happen. Yeah. Death threats, like messages, like it's a scary thing. I think just people go a little bit overboard sometimes. It's especially.
I was talking to somebody who used to work with the Forza Horizon team. This is the Xbox game.
The driving game.
I think it's now also on PlayStation. But and what harm can come from a driving game? I love those Forza Horizon games. You're driving through the landscape, but they apparently had a protocol for what to do when bomb threats were called in. Just to have a protocol means that it happens to them frequent enough that they needed to know how to deal with this. And players take it too far sometimes.
It's absurd. I do want to say one thing though, because when it comes to banking, I use my banking app. I have to push a little bit because I just feel like if the banks got it right, and I think some did. I think Monzo has a good UI, although I've never used it. But when you're managing your money, when you're managing your investments, in a way, there is an emotional connection to where your investments are and how much money you've spent on deliveries that month, and are you going to hit your level? Like, I still think there are opportunities for these institutions to gamify certain kind of, even like your electricity. Can I see how much money I've spent on my electricity this month compared to the last month? I think we're all, like, as humans, we're all kind of obsessed in gamifying our life and trying to track
Yeah.
it. I see my life a lot of times as an MMORPG. I'm leveling up. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to get 100 experience points in this. And then I'm going to I need to get rest because I need to have my rested XP for tomorrow. I think there's a fun way of seeing that. And I have a banking app that I use, and it is the most boring, stale. I hate using it. And I keep wondering, why on earth are they not focusing on that differentiation of kind of making a more fun UI? Especially because other digital banks like Revolut and Monzo, they've done that compared to the bank I use. So,
those banks, N26 as well, they've brought consumer level excellent user experience to banking, which I'm grateful for, but it's made it even harder when you're going back to using an old school banking app.
Exactly. But again, but what you're saying is, again, 95% of those people that use a banking app just want to get in, see what their balance is, send some money, and get out. Like, they're not there to play a game, or after a long day of work, I want to go on my banking app.
And then you go to Reddit and you'll see that there's a Revolut subreddit
right?
where you do get these power users who are going on and ranting about things which most people just don't care about. And Revolut would have the problem. They have to make sure they keep these power users like kind of mollified or show they're listening to them, but they can't be always just designing the app for those power users because almost all of their customers are not on Reddit giving feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, those consumer style banking apps also do have a lot of usability testing. They do. They do all this modern stuff of product management. So they are doing a good job.
I mean, there truly is a subreddit for everything. I mean, that's one of the things going for Reddit. It's a phenomena. Like, everything that you can think of, you can find a Reddit of people talking about it.
I know about this Revolut subreddit because I just saw it the other day. I don't know why Reddit showed it for me. It might have been that I was having some user experience problem with Revolut and I was looking up for an answer. And perhaps this hotspot result was Reddit. And then once you click on a Reddit link, then Reddit thinks you're interested in that thing forever. So I think this is why I've seen it. And I was really surprised to see this. And is this a good place for Revolut to do their customer support? And I don't think so. Again, it's the same thing of bias towards a particular type of user, but you listen to feedback where it comes in.
Exactly. It's free. It's there. Either you can use it, or you can potentially kind of use a service like yours that is kind of better designed for collecting feedback and evaluating it and weighting it. But whether you like it or not, if you're a product on the open market, chances are some people are talking about it, positive or negative.
Yeah. So what I see really important then is, what do you do with the feedback? How do you evaluate it? We've touched on this already, but let's say you've got, you're a small studio, you've finally got the feedback loop happening, you've got 100 pieces of feedback, but 3 or 4 of them really stand out as the one that people are saying over and over again. And this will happen. The first time you start really listening to feedback, you'll realize that the same 3 or 4 things come up over and over again. 50% of all the feedback you get will be those same 3 or 4 points. How do you decide what to do? And this is something I've been asking myself quite a lot lately, because we're in the same situation. We also build our product based on feedback. And I've come to realize how important it is to have a really strong vision for what you're doing. Now, vision sounds like blah, 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 vision, vision, vision. But it's not. Like, is your game, are you trying to create a cozy game? Are you trying to create a Dark Souls game? Are you trying to create something like Zelda? Yes. You need to know this so clearly, because if you don't, you're going to make certain mistakes. You're going to listen to the wrong feedback, or you're going to market your game in such a way that the wrong things are getting highlighted. So let's say you're paying someone to make a trailer for your game. Even indie studios typically pay someone to make the trailer. And if you're not communicating that vision really clearly, not just externally, but also within your team and to the people who work with you, they're going to portray the wrong thing about your game. And then people are going to come and say, why does this not work like this? Because in the trailer, they saw it looking like a, say, Dark Souls game. Maybe because it's vampires or whatever, but then actually you're making some sort of cozy game-ish thing, you're miscommunicating. So listening to feedback can also reveal that you're not communicating your vision for your game clearly enough to players, but also within your team and the freelancers you work with.
I love how you brought up vision, because that is such, I think it would be so helpful for players and the game houses or the developers to align on what the vision is for the game. And so everyone
Yeah.
agrees, like, this is what we're trying to build. Like, we're being very honest. Like, I think
Yeah.
Arc Raiders is a game that just came out. They're very honest with their vision. We're a PvP, PvE kind of game. I know some people may not like the toxicity that comes with PvP, but we're trying to build this
mechanics.
world.
This is mechanics. You need to go beyond the mechanics with your game.
Okay.
I really think, and I think game studios in general do this really well. They're really good at stating exactly what they see the game being. Some studios are better than others at communicating that over and over again with everybody they talk to. Don't communicate it well, and you will get the wrong feedback. And players will be frustrated because they don't understand why you're not listening to their feedback.
So give me an example of a high level vision. Like, I could say, like, I've worked in some companies where the idea is that you want a game to last forever. Like, you are building a franchise and you want people to be able to never quit the game. You can take a break, you can come back, and you can play that game. And to me, that's a very like powerful high level vision, because it's not specifically, like you were saying just now, about combat. It is about what this game represents in the lives of these players.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the level of vision that you're saying, or like what
I would say
examples
I'm not the right person to answer that, having never run a game studio. I couldn't go into enough detail. However, you did mention about game dads or dad gamers before.
Yeah,
for
gamer
example.
dads.
Yeah. So I sometimes am sold to on a game. It's like, this sounds so great, and I start playing it, and then the tutorial or the onboarding takes like half an hour. This is my gaming session over. And then I come back to it 2 weeks later and I've forgotten everything I went in the onboarding session. I have to go through it again, and it's like, screw this. So, yes, there's this like a game people can come back over and over again, but also saying exactly what demographic the game is for. Mm-hmm. And a gamer dad, I think that captures a lot, right? A person who wishes they could play a lot more. They only snatch half hours here and there. They need to be able to be enjoying the game within minutes, if not within seconds.
Yeah. And they can disconnect very easily. Like if the baby's crying, you got to put the game down. You can't lose all your progress. You have to be able to come back to it. It has to be mobile. You can't be sat down in an isolated room. I think that's where mobile gaming is so prominent and important nowadays, is because it gives people that level of access.
Exactly. And I think knowing very clearly who it's for, in the software industry world of product management, we talk about avatars or somebody, our ideal profile, where we actually describe down the point of giving them a name, an age, a gender, the job, life experience. Sometimes I think we take that too far, but to have somebody or a group of people you describe very well, it's like, these are the players we envisage playing our game. I think this is powerful.
Yeah, these are
However, again, the caveat that I haven't run a studio, I've never created a game. Well, created plenty of games in my teen years, but nothing that was ever released.
No, but I have to push back, because I know you're being very humble with your experience, but you've worked with a lot of game studios. You've dealt with these things firsthand. I think you have a really good kind of opinion and perspective on this. And it's important to be able to, I think, look at games from any perspective. It can't just be, oh, we're the game devs and we have an idea for it. I think everyone looking in has a valid opinion for how that game is, depending on how ambitious you are with people playing it. If you have a very strict demographic and you only want these types of players to play, fair enough, power to you. But I do like the idea of a game at least being open to different players, so you can understand where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are. This is my personal opinion. I want players to be able to try anything, and I've tried Bejeweled, and I don't like Bejeweled, and that's okay.
But this is one of the most played games in the world, right?
There we go. Exactly.
Is that King? Is Bejeweled a King game?
I think so. They do those types of games. It could be Candy Crush. There's so many, like those hyper casual games.
They are so good at knowing exactly who the game is for, and who it's not for. This is also just as important.
Well, I think I think this is tangential, but what's really interesting with hyper casual games and kind of more AAA games is the production model, or just the way these games are produced. A lot of game production started as kind of the Hollywood model. So you'd have producers, executive producers, just the way the game was built was very much like was being built through a movie, because you had one output. Once the game was out, it was like a movie. It was out. You don't think about it anymore. And then with kind of these more casual games, you get the Silicon Valley production model, which is all around kind of metrics and monetization and reading the KPIs and understanding exactly who this person is and kind of doing A/B tests. And what I've seen in gaming, and I'm trying to write an article on it because I'm really fascinated, is this merging of these like two worlds where you have like this Hollywood arm of game development, but also this hyper.
You don't see a clash with like two separate worlds that won't merge?
I don't think it's a clash, but it is. Maybe I think individual studios do clash because, for instance, one difference is what is the difference between a producer and a product manager?
Yeah,
because a producer historically has done the what, why, and the when, all three in one, and you'd have loads of producers running across the game. And then here comes product management from Silicon Valley saying, well, actually, we can take care of the what, and we can take care of the why, and you guys only do the when.
Yeah,
and in different studios, there are going to be different interpretations of what a producer and a product manager does. And I find that fascinating because games are constantly evolving, and the way that these internal studios work on them is changing and adapting, and every game studio does it differently.
I have a little anecdote relevant to this talk about hyper casual mobile games. Somebody I recently gave a demo call to, NDA, can't say who it is, but they find that one of the most common pieces of feedback they get from their players are take away that thing that's the thing that makes the game financially feasible. So players are saying, oh, I want that thing for free. But if they did that thing for free, is the number one piece of feedback they get. If they did that thing for free, then the studio would cease to exist. The game would cease to exist. The fundamental financial viability of the game requires that thing to exist. So this is also like some dilemma of feedback that, yes, you listen, but sometimes you just can't do that thing people are asking you to do.
And why not? I guess in your experience, have studios been honest about it with the players? Would they say up front, look, guys, we want to remove this cash shop or this monetization model, but if we do this, it would be kind of, we're a business at the same time, right? And I'm sure players can appreciate that. I think I've just found that transparency and honesty
I couldn't
go
imagine
a long
that type
way.
of transparency are good. You can stay transparent. We're listening. Unfortunately, we're unable to do this at the moment, or we're unable to do this. But if you go into too much detail, you're saying that to the wrong audience, right?
Maybe. But my own personal opinion, though, is that gamers nowadays are so much more, again, the way they're experts into the game and how it's being developed and the engine, and they have so much knowledge about it. Some gamers, thank you for correcting
me. The majority of
not...
gamers just want to play your game for a while and then move on to something else. They don't care about knowing about the mechanics or anything. They just rely on you to know about this stuff and do it.
It's the power user. But again, you see these power users and they have such a good understanding of the business model and just the environment of game development. And I've seen game studios that are very upfront and honest, and it's worked for them, at least what I've seen. But I'm very sure that there have been slip ups, and maybe sometimes saying those things is less helpful. But again, I'm always for honesty and transparency. I do have one more kind of question to ask you in terms of streamers. In terms of feedback, right? Because streamers have now become their own they have their own orbit of players and community, and there's a lot of feedback that comes through them. And like you look at the biggest streamers on Twitch and YouTube, they have a very powerful voice. And I think players are kind of attracted to these voices because they seem to be independent and brash and sometimes very blunt and honest. What are your thoughts on that, if you have any, on just feedback in that term?
That's fascinating. I hadn't thought about that, but a loud, charismatic voice with a large audience will create that mob mentality. Maybe that's the wrong word, but create a surge of feedback from people thinking something that's not really their own idea, but has been given to them. I guess this is also how democracy works, right? People come and give us ideas. I can talk about something very practical we've done in Feature Upvote to deal with this. We throttle. So there's a maximum number of votes that any idea can get in a 1 minute period, in a 5 minute period, in a 1 hour period, in a 1 day period. We have different levels of throttling, but so you can like loosen it up a little bit. But in general, if there's been too many votes too quickly, a message will say voting is closed temporarily. we won't give them any idea why. We just say like, try again soon. Secondly, people will sometimes try to be really clever and say, yes, I like what that person, the streamer says or whatever. I'm smart. I'm going to write a script that just makes a whole lot of votes happen really, really quickly and gets through any defenses. We have tons of defenses. We have really, really hardened defenses using firewall, bot detection, script detection, spam detection, and the throttling all in there. We also throttle by IP address, by the way. And again, we try to do that in a kind of non-transparent way, but without making people get too upset.
Yeah.
So, and I think any tool that automates feedback or voting or anything needs to have these types of things.
Absolutely.
To make sure you're not doing something just because one very loud voice told a whole lot of people this is the thing to do. And this is going back to Boaty McBoatface. How are we doing for time, by the way?
I think we're getting close to an hour and a half.
Okay, should we just talk about the Helldivers 2 situation? Is that relevant?
Yeah, please.
I think we talked about this in our intro call, and I thought this is a really good example of what happens if a game doesn't provide players a good way to give feedback, and yet players have feedback.
And this is the PlayStation kind of Sony network, the whole debacle, or what's the context behind it?
Exactly. So Helldivers 2, massive hit by Arrowhead Studios in Sweden. Sony either completely or partly owns Arrowhead Studios. And the game was launched early last year, 2025. I think initially it was you pay once, you have the game, that's it. And then Sony wanted people to have to sign up to the PlayStation Network to play the game. It's including existing players who had already bought the game. And players did not like this. They felt this was unfair, that they'd already bought the game. They shouldn't have to do this. And there was I think one or two people might have actively tried to encourage the mentality to do something about this. There was no easy way to say they were unhappy about this. They found a way. They did review bombing on Steam. Helldivers 2, as far as I know, still has the record for the most number of negative reviews on Steam for the thumbs down, even though it's a great game and almost universally liked. And this was because there was a concerted effort to show their disappointment with this decision by review bombing on Steam. Well, that requirement to be signed into the Sony PlayStation Network to play, it was never implemented. It was just an idea or a announcement that had been made. Arrowhead/Sony reversed that decision. Nobody ever had to do this. Life went back on as normal. But now if you go and look on Steam reviews or any sort of data aggregation of Steam reviews for Helldivers 2, last time I looked, it still had this enormous blip down in like the, it's like a chart with positive reviews, negative reviews.
Yeah,
it's usually positive and a few negative, and then it was this massive, massive dip, 3 times as many negative reviews as they ever got positive reviews. And it's probably going to be like that forever. So I guess the point of the story is, if you don't supply a way in which players can give you feedback that works for them, they will find a way, and it might not be something you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a delicacy to how you communicate potential decisions to players. I think I've learned this in my career and in hard ways where you need to be careful with what you say and how you say it. And there is always a risk that the players can take it a certain way. And then a mob mentality can come up, whether it's your fault or not. And there's just a danger to it. And
now, a caveat I have to say is I know nothing about this internally from Arrowhead Studios. I'm only sharing the information I've learned about in my research for how people manage feedback. It may have also had a positive experience long term. I don't know, because the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. All games are struggling to get visibility. Maybe it actually helped Helldivers 2 in the long run, because here I am talking about it now on a podcast a year and a half after all this happened. People talk about it. I don't know, but yeah.
No, it's a really interesting kind of just situation and an example to bring up, especially with everything we've talked about so far. I have one final question for you, Steve, which would be, I mean, you have such an interesting career. Like you've now gotten yourself into games, and you said you never kind of expected it. For anyone listening in that is kind of fascinated with what you're doing, kind of building your own product and kind of going to these studios and trying to, you've become an expert in some way in player feedback. for someone looking in and being like, how can I do something similar, or how can I kind of build my own thing? What advice do you have for those listening?
Wow, that's a big, big question.
It is a big one. I always save the biggest one for last, but
Yeah.
general advice.
Yeah. Generally, people around you are really supportive of the things you're doing when you're doing something creative. I've been amazed at how much former colleagues, when they were still colleagues, were really supportive and want to see you succeed, tell people what you're doing, put it out there as early as possible. Whatever you're doing, the best thing you can do is actually try to do something. If you're trying to make a product, like a software product, a game, a book, anything you're doing, create a course, a video, the best thing you can do is just try something, anything with a very short time frame and get it out there. You learn so much by actually doing. You'll be thinking, oh, it's going to be horrible. I'll put it up there and I'll get all this negative feedback. You'll discover very quickly that nobody actually sees what you're doing. It's very hard to get people aware of what you're doing. And then you learn from that, okay, this is what I have to learn to do. It's not just build the thing, but make people aware of the thing.
Absolutely. And then very sound advice. I just want
And
to
what
give
about you? What's your advice on that? Because you're here doing this podcast, which also is a creative endeavor.
I love how you flip that. It's
because I don't know all the answers, and I want to hear from other people.
Absolutely. I've found that people are incredibly supportive, again, like you're saying, with creative endeavors. This podcast was kind of a risk to take. I started it in the midst of my career. I had to find just one person to give me an interview to start, because it's easier now to get episodes, because I have 20 episodes now live, and people see it and like, okay, you seem legit. But I remember my first episode, I found a guy in London called Rue, who works in mobile game studio as a product manager, and our first conversation was about product management. And I thought this would be a podcast about product. And slowly, as I started having conversation with more people, I realized what I really want to do is kind of unpack that chain of value that it takes to build a game. Because to make a game from kind of conception all the way to implementation execution, it takes so many different roles and people. And I think what a lot of people have said is just to start. And just even if your vision isn't, accept the fact that the vision you have for what you think at the start is probably not what it's going to be later on. Like, be open to change, be open to feedback, as we discussed. And don't be afraid to build something and put yourself out there, because everyone who's done something before you, everyone who's built a podcast, a company, whatever it may be, started at some point in fear or in kind of a self-conscious idea that maybe they can't do it. But the ones that do are the ones that tried. There's a really good Steve Jobs quote where he talks about the difference between a dreamer and a doer is that the doers actually go out and try doing it. And those are the ones that typically are the ones that achieve something. And the ones that just dream about it, they don't. And the only difference is actually doing it or not doing it. So I think echoing what you say, you just got to try it. Just go for it.
The idea that you realize what your vision wasn't what it was, isn't actually what you want to build. You only find out by doing. How did you get people to come and listen to your first episode?
I would go on, I would look at all the different channels. So how am I releasing this podcast? Well, I've got YouTube, I've got Spotify, I've got Apple Podcasts. I've also got social media channels like Instagram, TikTok. And the idea would be, how can I take what is a 1 hour and a half podcast episode like this one, and then breaking it up into 5-minute to 10-minute clips, which then I can break down into kind of bite-sized chunks. And then those 10-minute clips can even become reels of 1 or 2 minutes, where you can have maybe quicker editing, kind of faster cuts, so you get straight to the good stuff. And just trying to go through that. And I did that for a couple months, trying to see what formula worked best. And now I'm always coming back to the fact that beyond just the podcast itself, you need to back up the content with kind of B-roll. Like if we're talking about a game, I'd love to see what that game is while you're talking about it.
Yeah.
How to get to that point where I can edit all these videos at incredibly fast speed and keep up with all the different episodes I'm doing, because I'm doing, I think, 1 per week now. I'm picking it up again. It's not easy. So
this is
figuring it out.
We've been talking for more than an hour. Your episodes are typically an hour and a half. How much time do you spend working per episode, roughly? 5 hours, 10 hours?
I'd say around 5 to 6 hours, where I would edit the original podcast episodes itself, and then I'd typically get about 5 to 6 clips from the episode, about five to 10 minutes, 6. 6 5 to 10 minute clips from each episode, and then I'd get probably 12 Instagram reels, which then I can try to post almost every day. But what I've also learned is that there's an immense difference between quantity and quality.
Yeah.
And I found that if I spend maybe 2 hours making a really good Instagram reel that's edited and looks great, it's going to have a way better performance than doing 10 reels that are just kind of quicker, not much editing, just the chat itself with the subtitles. And I'm trying to strike that balance as a one person operation at the moment. And
People don't
uh,
realize just how much work goes into a good podcast.
oh yeah,
It's easy just to record and publish. It's hard to record and publish something good that people want to listen to. You asked me earlier on about using AI tools to help with get player sentiment and manage feedback. Same thing you're just touching on here. I can use an AI tool to make the clips for sharing on social media really quickly. But if I want them to be good, I have to do a lot of
you
it by
got to edit
hand.
it exactly. It's,
Yeah.
it's like that LLM argument. You can get all the feedback you want from that Reddit page that day, but you've got to go through it and kind of create that output,
Yeah.
edit what there is.
We use like Riverside's tools to create some snippets or for sharing for reels, shorts, whatever, but only to give us ideas. And then once we've got the ideas, it's like, okay, now to actually do this good.
Oh yeah, for anyone listening, Riverside is I would not be able to do this podcast right now if it wasn't for Riverside. They have a really cool product,
Fantastic
and
tool.
they're building it very quickly in terms of how they're improving it. And I do want to say one more thing though, in terms of kind of building the podcast. I've been really blessed to work with some great people that have helped me along the way. So like the art that you see was a friend from New York. A
Wow.
lot of the posting and the scheduling was because of a friend of mine that helped out. Just kind of putting it together. I would not kind of be where I am without them. So it's always like, despite
Interesting.
kind of this idea that entrepreneurs are these solo people that kind of can will these things into existence, the amount of help that you get along the way, like I always want to remind myself, like I'm very blessed to have had people to be there for me at that time.
Yeah, you can't help the network you build, beat the network you build up through your career when it comes to resources, people to help you and to be your
Exactly.
champions.
Exactly. Well, Steve, it's been fantastic talking to you, and I had a really good time. Do you want to just mention again the name of the business, the product that you're building, Feature Upvote, and then also your podcast? I'd love for you to just.
Okay, so Feature Upvote. Let's see what our tagline is today. Let's have a look. We change it from time to time. Painlessly collect feedback from your players. More insights, less noise. We had T-shirts made with that on the back at a recent conference. And the podcast. So we've discovered by customer research that it's mostly community managers that bring Feature Upvote into studios. They're the ones struggling to deal with the flood of feedback. So we created a podcast, or I created a podcast called The Community Lounge, in which I interview customers and non-customers. I interview community managers. Some of them are customers, some aren't, about how they got into the role, how they go about doing it, advice to doing it better, with the idea of just giving these people a voice, learning from them, and hopefully raising awareness of Feature Upvote amongst potential new customers. And that's all linked to on our website.
Fantastic. I'll put that all in the description below. But otherwise, Steve, it's been great talking to you, and I had a brilliant time speaking to you today.
Me too. It's been a real honor to be on the show, and I wish you all the best with the future episodes.
Thank you so much. Likewise for you.